daily bread and you use these devotions, they are in the back table right next to that bookcase. Please help yourself to them. So last week we looked at the preparation, and this week we're going to look at the proposal. So looking at Ruth chapter 3, and I want us to point out that Ruth startles Boaz. We'll talk about, again, this idea of uncovering his feet and spreading his robe over her and all that. But there are 7 verses of surprises in this portion. And let's begin. First of all, I want us to look at this keeper is a sleeper. This keeper is a sleeper. Verse 7, Ruth chapter 3, verse 7. I'll make sure I have the microphone on. Yes, now it's on. Ruth 3, verse 7, when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Now again, as I mentioned last week, this is a cultural thing. I would never have instructed my daughter when she was dating Mike, my son-in-law. I would never have said, now this is what you have to do, Becky. You're going to have to wait till he falls asleep, then you're going to uncover his feet and lay there, and maybe at midnight he'll wake up, and if he puts his cover over you, that means that you're engaged to be married. I think the engagement ring is so much safer. I'm telling you, so much safer. But I want to talk about this keeper is a sleeper. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to talk about the fact that why did Boaz sleep on the threshing floor? Well, there's a few reasons, and I think there's 2 main reasons why he would have slept there. One is to protect his harvest from thieves. This is very important that if you didn't get your harvest in, if you didn't have that protected, you might starve through the season. So it was very much culturally expected that your grain would have somebody sleeping next to it at night. Someone or some people, just as a protection while you're going through this process of winnowing and gathering your grain for a year. Now the problem is that if you're a sound sleeper, they could have just taken a skid steer in there and then bucket scooping that thing out until you just had a little lump by your head. Now the other reason is to be close to his work during the busy harvest season. Now maybe some of you sometimes have to work remotely. When I say remotely, not in your normal work pattern, and you might have a place to stay during that time. Whether you go to Long Island to work with people and you have to spend some time there, if they don't send you home every night, you have to take a 10-hour trip back and forth. Now, this is probably why he was sleeping there, but there's a little something interesting. Now, this Johann Peter Lang, he's a commentary writer. This is translated from German. And Lang's commentary speculates that Boaz was perhaps relieving his overseer that night, since Naomi is informing Ruth that tonight he winnows barley. Now, you remember that overseer that reported to Boaz and said, oh, this young lady has been gleaning? That overseer, so that he might actually have a chance. And it would make good sense. Now, in looking at this, the Bible says this: when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. Now, in the world we live in today, and probably the world we've lived in for centuries, that kind of almost sounds like a buzzword for he was tipsy, that he could have been drunk when he had eaten and drunk. It wasn't that when he had eaten and he was drunk. When he had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. But I want to break this down so you don't think like this guy's actually a drinker or a bar hopper kind of thing. I want to give you the breakdown. So, first of all, he ate. The Bible tells us that when he had eaten, he ate. We have no problem understanding what this means. And imagine when the harvest is coming in. Now, I just finished my last slice of bread this morning. keep the loaf in the fridge to make it last as long as possible. And then I toasted it because it was already crunchy. So stale bread has a really good second life as toast. Can you imagine that grain? Now, I am not a plastic kind of like, I don't want to reheat something in a plastic container. I'd rather be in glass, something that is a little less absorbent and a little less discharging and that kind of thing. But can you imagine what it must have been like for them to have just grain put in a hopper or bin? Toward the end, it was probably all pretty crunchy. It was probably all pretty well, you were eating for nutrition, I'll say. And I'm sure with this fresh grain, oh man, they were probably like taking and just, he'd eat. And then it says he drank. Now, I want to point out there is a difference between drunk, he had eaten and drunk. There's a difference between drunk and drunk. And I don't believe that he was drunk. The Bible says, and his heart was merry. We're like, ooh. But the literal translation is that his heart was good. Now, the Bible would not have said it was good if he'd done something bad. You get what I'm saying here? Now, we have all these euphemisms. Tipsy, feeling good. But this is not what's happened here. He is celebrating. Do you realize how difficult it was to get from farm to crop to harvest to actually having that? This was life and death for them. There would be celebrating. There would be hooting and hollering. But this is not telling us that he went out, got drunk, and fell asleep on a pile of grain, and end of story. This is not the virtue that we see in him. So I want to just make this clear, that when it says his heart was merry, it's not, there are terms for this. There are terms in the Hebrew Aramaic that make it very clear that somebody had imbibed too much alcohol and they had been compromised by it. This is not what it's using here. It is saying literally his heart, tick-tock, tick-tock, that one, it was good, the word good. Now, not only was the keeper a sleeper, and I'm glad that it was the owner that had fallen asleep, and not one of the workers. That would have been a little different situation. But this mister is a twister. You say, good grief, Joe, these are terrible rhymes. Where are you coming up with this stuff? I'm coming up from my brain. They are terrible rhymes. The Bible tells us it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. How do we get this? Well, almost always in our lives, that term, it happened in the middle of the night, is followed by something not so good. When the phone rings, now in our house, if it rings after 9 o'clock, there's something really wrong. But and I've gotten plenty of phone calls at 3 in the morning, and when it wasn't Stuart wishing me a happy day of the week, this game we play, I return the favor plenty of times and let you know. But everybody in my family knows I get up at 10 after 4 in the morning. I'm 10 after 4. On Saturdays and Sundays, I sleep until about 4 or 5 or 5 o'clock. I'm wide awake. I was that annoying child. If you had a child that was up super early in the morning and ready to talk and practice playing the drums, that was me. It's still me. I have learned in 46 years that Belinda is not that person. If I uncovered her feet and laid down at her feet at 4 in the morning, I'm going to tell you I'd be laying on the floor, because her reaction would be, by accident, I kicked you out of the bed. But you can imagine that almost nothing good follows. It happened in the middle of the night. We've gotten a phone call from our son to say, I'm okay. 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, we were expecting that. He said, I've just been pulled over by the Ohio State Police. Was not expecting that. He was driving to Michigan. Kind of knew about that. I'm going to just give him the benefit of the doubt. And he was with two other people who were asleep in the car. He had made a phone call to his sister and left his license on his bureau in his dormitory room when he got pulled over by the police, and did not have a license, did not know the name of the person that the car was registered to. They pulled the three of them out of the car, separated them, made sure it wasn't stolen. They then said, you can't drive anymore, but didn't give any tickets. But you know, at 1 o'clock in the morning when your child calls up or a family member calls up and says, I'm okay, you immediately don't hear okay. And that's the case here. So, anyways, this mister is a twister. The word bent, did you see that here in verse 8? It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. That word is the Hebrew word laugheth. Now, it almost sounds like a King James Version kind of thing. He laugheth a lot. No, but it is the word laugheth. And it has the idea of twisting or spiraling. Think DNA. Think threads on a bolt or something. And can you imagine, I can picture this right in my head. Side sleeper, all of a sudden, waking up, kind of getting aware, and there's a woman at my feet, and you can just see him like, do this, right? This is, did you have a good night's sleep last night? Oh yeah, up until about the middle of the night, and then everything changed. It has the idea of twisting or swirling. His body rose up, but his reaction did not. Did you see that? We don't hear him like screaming, ah! Or, who's that? Get out of here! We don't hear, the Bible didn't print out those comic book characters like the @ sign, the question mark, and a slash, and quotation marks to let us know something had improperly come out of his mouth. He will ask a question, that's for sure. And I'm telling you, if you find somebody asleep at your feet in the middle of the night, you're probably going to have a lot of questions too. But what we do see here is, remember how it said he had a good heart? This is what Proverbs 17:22 says. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. We have a guy here that has as the Bible tells us here, when his heart was merry, we can see here. This is what we all need. We need a heart. It doesn't have to be happy, but a heart that's merry. We've seen the comments about Boaz in this, but now let's see that Ruth is couth. Ruth is couth. Proper. The term proper. And he said, who are you? And she answered, well, who do you think it is, you lousy numbskull? It's the girl you're going to marry. No, that's not what we get here. And he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. This has to do with redemption. Now, again, Old Testament marriage and New Testament marriage aren't quite the same. So that Israel would never lose an inheritance, that a family would never lose a descendant, they had the whole process of the kinsman redeemer who could marry you. Now, sadly, they had to be a relative. For Ruth, this is great because she's the in-law. And so she has to be redeemed, the property will be redeemed, a child will be named in the name of her first husband. This child will be brought forth. She will be cared for. This is what this whole idea of covering with your garment. So bear in mind, this is my brain working. Couth describes somebody who is cultured, refined, well-mannered. And it might have been a little deflating. Now, all I can think of when I read Who Are You is, have you ever seen Alice in Wonderland? If you haven't, this is not going to make any sense to you at all. But if you have seen it, then you'll get this, who are you? And that might have been a little deflating for Ruth. Think about it. She had been gleaning for a while. He'd even talked to her face to face to say, don't go to any other fields. I've told everybody to keep you safe. I've got plans for caring for you. How's your mother-in-law, Naomi? But, in the middle of the night, you're a little groggy, maybe a little foggy, and you aren't expecting anybody at your feet. I don't know if this is where the term, he got cold feet comes from. You ever hear like a guy is going to get married and that night before he's got butterflies in his stomach and he's all nervous the prospect of standing in front of thousands of people at your royal regal marriage gets you kind of scared. This is probably where he got cold feet comes from, because the feet are uncovered and this is a proposal. Again, bearing in mind there were other people in this threshing floor. So I can imagine it was like, who are you? I am Ruth, your maid. And then what is she is basically saying here when she says, spread your cover over your maid, for you are a close relative or a redeemer. If you look, you may have, if you have a NASB, you'll see actually it says or redeemer. And I've broken this down into just the simplest terms. Ruth says, I am Ruth. Will you redeem / marry me? It's a beautiful love story. Let's look at the blessed and the Hesed. Now, the women's ministry group had a retreat, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where the study was on Hesed. I don't know if you remember that or not. I remember that. Could be, time flies, could have been 10 years ago. We had one on the word Hesed, which has the idea of kindness. Sometimes it's translated mercy. It's the Hebrew word. And in fact, that's the word that is used right here in verse 10. Then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. Remember I said there's a ton of pronounced blessings in here. This is one of those pronounced blessings. May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown your last kindness. This is the Hesed, the mercy, the kindness that we look for in the Old Testament. Most often it's referring to the Lord, this kindness and mercy. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Kindness. I want to share some verses with you about kindness. You can just listen or follow along or write down, but I want to look at Galatians first, and I want to give you some New Testament verses that really put kindness into perspective. And if you've ever had somebody show you a kindness when you really needed one, and it really bridged you through a difficult time, then you understand what kindness is. Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. One of the fruits of the Spirit is the idea of kindness. Practicing random acts of kindness. Galatians, next one is Ephesians. Ephesians 4:32. And the scriptures read, in Ephesians, the scripture reads 4:31. Of course I turned that. Verse 32. This is what Paul, writing to the church at Ephesus, while Paul is in prison, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ has forgiven you. That kindness can be manifested in a forgiving spirit, an unoffended spirit, a spirit of reconciliation, kindness. Now we're going to skip Philippians and we're going to go to Colossians. So if you ever want to remember that book of the Bible order, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians is go eat popcorn. Okay, go eat popcorn. We'll get you Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians chapter 3 and verse 14. Beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. In some translations, that is actually kindness. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, the great love chapter of the Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And look what it says. I'll start in verse 1. I'll start in verse 4. This is where he starts listing out what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Did you see the very second thing he listed out? Love is kind. This is a story about redemption. This is a story about kindness. This is a story about love. And did you notice how he responded? He said, I will do. Here in verse 11, sorry. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do whatever you ask. That's not the marriage response. It is, I do or I will, but not I will do. He was so close. He was so close to actually saying the proper formula. If you've ever seen The Princess Bride, this would be where they are saying, man and wife, man and wife. And if you've never seen the movie, it makes no sense at all. Nonetheless. Verse 11, do not fear, my dear, do not fear. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask. For all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. May we all be a people of excellence. Excellence in the practice of our faith. Excellence in our character. Excellence in our behavior. Do not fear. Now, give me a quick list. I don't want to just make this list. But that phrase is found often in the Bible. Isaiah 41, verse 10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Do not fear. Are you going through something hard, strong, confusing, difficult? Do not fear. I am with you, God says. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Joshua. Book of Joshua. Have not I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. These are important things to remember. God is not your absent partner. God is always abiding with you. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Psalm 56, verse 3. When I am afraid, I trust in you. Psalm 34:4. I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. If you ever find yourself in a fearful situation, these are scriptures that let you know that God's abiding presence is with you always. He doesn't have a shift. He's not a caregiver that needs respite himself. He is with us always, at all times, and in all ways. Do not fear. It's wonderful that Boaz is telling her this. Have you ever put yourself out there and gotten the rejection? This is not the rejection. This is total and complete acceptance. how different this scenario on the threshing floor looks than what takes place in Mark chapter 6, verses 22 through 25, and I'll read it for you. I know it's small. And when the daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests, and the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you." And he swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom." And she went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" And she said, "The head of John the Baptist." Immediately she came in a hurry to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." When he says here in this verse, "I will do whatever you ask," what a different set of people. We have opposite ends of the pendulum swing. We have from the lowest of the low, King Herod, who is taking his brother's wife, not by a redemption, but just fell in lust with his brother's wife and took her as his own. And that the exotic dance that is done at his birthday, and by the way, any birthday celebration in the Bible, somebody dies. There aren't a lot of them, but somebody dies. Whether it's Pharaoh's birthday and the baker dies, or whether it's Herod's birthday and John the Baptist dies. But what a difference! We have Herod and Herodias, and we have Boaz and Ruth. From virtue to villainy. True and blue. Now, I told you actually get a better connection with the color when it's actually written in that color. So that's the only reason it's in blue, because this is blue on blue here, but true and blue. And he says, "Now it is true, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I." Have you ever noticed that if you want closure on something, that there will probably be a hold-up in that process? Whatever you're hoping to finish, whether it's a project at home, it always seems like there's one more thing, or one part missing, or in this case, it looks like she's going to be redeemed. He has accepted her proposal, but there's something. But it quite doesn't happen the way you want it to. And it's true. There is a guy that's actually a closer relative to Elimelech than Boaz. And this changes everything. I don't want you to be too down. I just want you to know that even the proposal by Ruth is at an impasse here. There's a pause. Because he cannot redeem her if there's a closer redeemer. And there's a closer redeemer. Thank God it's only one. Have you ever had to debug something and you find out it's not one problem, it's a million problems? At least there is but one problem. This last point is the twain remain. Verse 13. He may have been startled, and he may have been a little dumbfounded, but he collected his marbles in time to say this: "Remain this night. And when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning." Again, there's no hanky-panky that's taking place here. But I'll tell you, if you can remember dating, you want to spend as much time with that person as possible, and hopefully your marriage is that way, that you want to spend as much time as possible with that person, and he's not sending her away. They are going to stay there. She's going to be at his feet, and he is going to be laying on his pile of grain. And I want you to know that he will be a spokesman for this redemption. I think he's going to do a good job of making it very hard for this guy to want to redeem her. This is love. This is love. So they remain. Boaz asks her to stay hidden until morning. He tells her no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor, and there's a couple of key reasons for this. One, preventing scandal. Reputation, listen, character is who you are when nobody's around. Reputation is what people think you are. They have good character. There's nothing that's going on here that is unseemly, unfitting, or unholy. But he still wants to protect her character. Preventing scandal, because they were alone at night, being seen together could spark false rumors of impropriety, ruining Ruth's standing in the community. You may not know this, but people, even in this country legally, are very afraid that they might be detained or under investigation. She was an alien. If somebody started the rumor that she was on that threshing floor, she might be driven out of Israel. Boaz is being very cautious to protect her character. But not only to prevent scandal, he is protecting the redemption process. Boaz mentions that there's a closer relative who has the first right to redeem the family's land. Boaz wanted to keep their meeting quiet until he could legally and properly handle the situation in the town the next day. So it would have been really, really nice if that night, when she proposed to Boaz, that they could say yes, and the next day go down to the parson's house and get hitched, and that would be it. But there is a delay. The truth from Ruth is this. I want to point out two things. I've listed one. She chose to rest in a Redeemer. When we sang redeemed, that's all about Jesus. We must put our soul in the rest and care of Jesus. This is the message. This book is the Old Testament illustration of Jesus, who is the bridegroom, and his church, the Christians, the bride itself. Choosing to rest in a Redeemer. Why would you want to ever abandon the one that loved you so much that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us? But the second thing I want to point, this is maybe a little ancillary, is there are times when we just have to wait. There are times in which God is just giving us an opportunity to grow in our patience. I know we all kind of recoil from the lessons of patience because it usually happens with tribulation and waiting, but this is a great lesson about waiting for the appropriate time. They didn't make out, they didn't consummate a marriage that they weren't sure that they could be actually following through on. They waited. I'm sure many of you thought that within 2 years we would have had a permanent pastor. I know the Pastoral Search Committee certainly did not anticipate that they were going to be meeting 4 years, but we must wait. Ruth did not settle. Boaz did not settle. They were told, they were informed, they realized that the waiting was necessary. Well, you can obviously read ahead. We've got one chapter to go, but I'm going to tell you, it was worth the wait. It was worth the wait. We're going to be dismissed to a communion service, and then we will have our song.